In this session we shall be looking at how we forecast data using moving averages, and this is part one of 2 sessions on this subject. Often accountants have to forecast what the sales or costs or activity levels are going to be at some point in the future. Now there are a variety of different ways of forecasting this information, but one way is to look at what's happened in the past and see if there is a pattern that emerges from the data that we can extend or extrapolate into the future. One of the common methods used to identify these kinds of patterns is to use what are called moving averages. So let's have a look at an example. A company wants to forecast its sales for the next 2 weeks, and as a consequence of this, it's analysed its past sales over the previous 4 weeks, and we've got a table of data recording this information. So we've got details of the daily sales for the previous 4 weeks. Now the first thing that we're going to do with this data is to calculate the moving average for the data. At this point we've got to decide whether we're going to be making a 2-day moving average, a 3-day moving average, a 4-day moving average, and so on. Well, given that we have a 5-day working cycle, so a 5-day week, it's sensible that we're going to use a 5-day moving average. So what we do, we go back to our table of data and we'll add on an additional column headed 5-day moving average. And we'll now start calculating our moving averages. Well, we're doing a 5-day moving average, so my first calculation will be based on Monday through to Friday in week 1, and I'm going to calculate the average takings based on those 5 days. So I calculate that my moving average is 1,240 from that data, and I'm going to position it in the table in the middle of the data used to calculate that moving average. Next, I will calculate the next moving average, which is going to be based on Tuesday from week 1 through to Monday of week 2. And when I calculate that, that works out at a moving average of £1,260. And I'll continue doing these calculations for the rest of the data. And so I've now completed as many of the moving averages as I can from the data. You'll notice that the first 2 days of week 1 and the last 2 days of week 4 don't have a moving average, and that's simply because there isn't sufficient data to calculate a 5-day moving average for those days. What we next do with that 5-day moving average is we have a look at it and see whether there is a pattern to the data that we've calculated. And we can see quite clearly that there is a pattern, that each day we see the 5-day moving average increasing by £20. And this increase is known as the data's trend. Next, we look at whether the data has any seasonal variations. Now a seasonal variation, this is the amount by which actual data is different or varies from the trend that we've just calculated for the same period in different cycles. So whether it's for the same day each week, for the same month each year, etc. So let's go back to our table of data. So we add on an additional column to our table recording seasonal variations. And what we'll do is, for the lines of data, those days where we have both the actual figure and a moving average, we'll take our takings and we'll deduct the 5-day moving average. And that and the difference there we'll record in the seasonal variation column. So the first line for which we have data is Wednesday of week 1. 1040 less 1240 is minus 200. And we'll now complete the rest of this table in the same manner. Once we've done this, we can now have a look at the same days each week and see whether there is a pattern. And this pattern is going to be the seasonal variation for that day. So if we have a look at Wednesdays, well, we notice in each week the Wednesday seasonal variation is minus £200. And we would also examine all of the other days of the week as well. Well, if we do that, we notice the following seasonal variations. That Monday, our seasonal variation is plus £200. Tuesday is minus 300. Wednesday is minus 200, as we saw previously. Thursday is plus 100, and Friday is plus 200. One thing to note about seasonal variations is if we add them up for all of our different days, it will come up to 0. So what can we do with this information? Well, what we're going to do is use it in order to forecast what our sales are going to be for the following 2 weeks. So we start with the latest trend figure that we were able to calculate. Now going back to our table, this was Wednesday in week 4. So I brought up a table that shows Wednesday of week 4, where we had calculated a trend or a 5-day moving average of £1,540. What we can then do is we can add the daily trend figure to that £1,540 for the next 2 weeks, or until the end of week 6. Now this is our trend for the next coming couple of weeks. What we then need to do is we need to make adjustments to that trend figure to take into account each day's seasonal variation. Now we've previously calculated our seasonal variations for each day of the week. So for Monday it's going to be plus 200, Tuesday minus 300, etc. Lastly, we can calculate what our forecasted sales are going to be for weeks 5 and 6, and we do this by taking the trend and then adding that seasonal variation for each day. So for Monday of week 5, my seasonal variation, my forecasted sale is going to be the trend of 1600 plus the seasonal variation of 200. That gives me forecasted sales of 1800. For Tuesday, I've got the trend of 1620 minus the seasonal variation of 300. That gives me forecasted sales of 1320, and so on.